How you doing there? Wait, should I move my... Yeah, that's a little better. How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Lamed, Daf 30 of Masechta Sotah. Friends, the truth is we're learning Daf 30, but I'll tell you honestly, my plan, first of all, we have to do like a whole bunch of Chav Testament Beis, and my plan is really to get to the end of the parak on Daf Lamed Aleph. So not only is this a very challenging Daf, we're also going to do about a Daf and a half. That's at least the plan. I'm going to be exhausted by the end of this daf. Friends, take out your brains for this daf. I can't guarantee it's going to help, but it's a doozy. But at the end of today's daf, we're done with Tum Entire, as far as I'm aware. So that's good. What did I get up to? Oh, did I? Oh, that's cool. Tomorrow's daf, I guess it's like a whole parak. All right. Anyways, you ready? Let's do it. Tum Entire. Should I just do a Babylon first? One sec. All right, Babylon complete. Hopefully there won't be too many sunflower people outside, and we can go weiter. Oh gosh, wish us luck. All right, here we go. Tum Entire. Okay, the Chav Testament Beis. About 10 lines into the page. Tanya, Reb Yossi says Reb Yossi minayin la revi'i ba kodesh posel bara. Okay. I'm going to be doing some Kal V'chomers today. Going to have to use your brain a little bit. Says Reb Yossi, Minayin l'Revi'i b'Kodesh Apostle. How do we know that there is a concept of a Revi'i l'Tumah when it comes to Kodesh, to Korbanos, and it ends there, right? That it ends at a Revi'i. How do we know this? So Vidinu, says Reb Yossi, it's logical. Mechusar Kippurim, barabam. Well, who can tell me what a Mechusar Kippurim is? Mechusar Kippurim is like, for example, Yav Azav. And he's, you know what, this week's Parsha is Tazria Mitzorah, at least when I'm recording. So, Mitzorah. At the end of, when he's done with everything, he goes to the mikveh. And then, although I feel like Mitzorah is a little bit more complicated because then there's like more steps. Alright, let's go back to Zav. Zav, Yava Zav. And he's done being a Zav, right? He saw Ziva 3 times. And then he was a Zav Gadol, a big Zav. Babylon. So he was a big Zav. And so then after 7 days of not seeing any more Ziva, so he's done being a Zav. He goes to the mikveh. And then after he goes to the mikveh, he's a Tuvul Yom for the rest of the day. He can't eat Truma for the rest of the day. He obviously can't eat Korbanos either. Comes nightfall, he's then able to eat Truma at that point, but he still cannot eat Korbanos until the next morning, the next day when he brings the Korbanos that he has to bring. At that point, he can now eat Korbanos too. So now, in that final interim period, after he's gone to the mikveh and after nightfall, right? After he's gone to the mikveh, he's a Tvul Yom. Nightfall, he's no longer a Tvul Yom, but he hasn't yet brought his Korbanos yet. Until he brings his Korbanos, he's what's called a Mechusar Kippur. So now, so my Mechusar Kippurim, says Reb Yossi, when it comes to Mechusar Kippurim, Shemuter b'Truma, as we just said, that Mechusar Kippurim is allowed to eat Truma, right? He's no longer a Tvul Yom. It's nighttime already. He's no longer a Tvul Yom. He can eite Truma. Posel b'Kodesh, but he can't eat Kodesh. He can't eat Korbanos. A Shlishi sheposel b'Truma. So a Shlishi who that a Shlishi when it comes to Truma, it's posel, right? There's a Shlishi by Truma and it ends there. It's posel when it comes to Truma. And udin hu sheyaiser revi'i b'Kodesh. So certainly we should learn out Revi'i. That there's a concept of Revi'i by Kodesh, right? Meaning, if a Mechusar Kippurim who is allowed to eat Truma is not allowed to eat Kodesh, right? He's posel b'Kodesh. So, a Shlishi l'Tumah, which is more stringent in that when it comes to Truma, it's posel, certainly then it should make a Revi'i when it comes to Kodshim to be posel as a Revi'i. So that is how Reb Yossi learns that there's a concept of Revi'i when it comes to Kodesh. V'lomadnu shlishi lakodesh min ateri, u'revi'i mikal v'chomer. And we learn out a shlishi when it comes to kodesh from the Torah. It said we're about to quote a pasuk, and the revi'i from the kal v'chomer that we just learned via the Mechusar Kippurim. Shlishi lakodesh min aTorah min alon. How do we know about shlishi when it comes to kodesh? Where do we see it? Where do we know that from the Torah? Dichsiv, as the pasuk says, ve'abasar asher yigam b'chol tameh, that any basar. Now this pasuk is talking about b'sar shlomim. This pasuk is talking about a korban shlomim, which of course is kodesh. Kodshim kalim. Asher yigam b'chol tameh, that will touch any tumah. Now the Torah writes about rishon l'tumah, sheni l'tumah, and we're saying that any korbanis, any kodesh, any korban meat, any shlomim meat that touches any kind of kodesh, any kind of tumah, whether it's a rishon l'tumah, sheni l'tumah, v'abasar shigah b'chol tameh lo ye'achal, cannot be eaten. So milo askina d'noga b'sheni. Are we not talking about even if it touches a sheni l'tumah, it cannot be eaten, it becomes tameh? It's saying that you can't eat it. So we see that there's a concept, right? If this b'sar shlomim touches a sheni, it becomes a shlishi. So we see that there's shlishi l'tumah when it comes to a kodesh. Revi'i mikal v'chomer kedamar. And then the revi'i when it comes to kodesh is from the kal v'chomer that we said from the Mechusar Kippurim. Fine. Omer Rabbi Yechon, says Rabbi Yechon, Tambribi eini yodea mahu. Rabbi Yochanan says, I don't understand Rabbi Yossi's kal v'chomer to say that there's a revi'i by kodesh. Right? Bribi is like a way of, like the Gadol Ador. Rabbi Yossi, of course, nimuko imoy, as we learned about, I believe, in Masechta Eruvin. Fine. Rabbi Yossi, Alachak Rabbi Yossi mechaverev. Okay. Sharei tshuvasoi b'tzidoi. We have a kasha. Oichel haba machmas tvul yom yochiach. Says Rabbi Yochanan, let me ask you a kasha from Ochel haba machmas tvul yom. Where am I? She'posel b'truma. That it's possible when it comes to truma. Ve'eno oser revi b'kodesh bara. That Rabbi Yochanan asks a kasha. Rabbi Yochanan asks a kasha. What about food that a tvul yom touches? Right. So a tvul yom is generally assumed to have a status of a sheni l'tumah, and a tvul yom touches food she'posel b'truma. That food would be a shlishi, it would be possible b'truma, ve'eno oser revi b'kodesh, and it does not make revi b'kodesh. So the whole thing with so Rabbi Yossi's whole thing was that, well, Mechusar Kippurim is mutter b'truma, and yet he's oser, he's possible when it comes to kodesh. So then certainly a shlishi, which is possible by truma, and therefore it's more stringent, certainly it should make a revi'i b'kodesh. But Rabbi Yochanan asks, but what about food that was touched by a tvul yom, that tvul yom is possible when it comes to truma, and it does not make a revi'i b'kodesh. So therefore, I would argue that just like this food that was touched by a tvul yom does not make a revi'i b'kodesh, so also a shlishi, which the food that was touched by a tvul yom, which is possible by truma, I don't remember if I said that, which is possible by truma, and yet it does not make a revi'i b'kodesh. So I would say also that this food that is a shlishi, which is possible by truma, also does not make a revi'i by kodesh. D'Tanya, and what is this? How do we know that it does not make a revi'i by kodesh? D'Tanya is within the Brisa. Abba Shaul Omer says Abba Shaul tvul yom. That if you have a tvul yom, tchila likodesh. So we treat a tvul yom as be'etzem a rishon when it comes to kodesh, when it comes to korbanis. L'tamei shnayim v'lifsol echad. That it will make two levels of tumah and one level of psul. Right. So if you have a Tvul Yom, so he's like a Rishon with regard to Kodesh, and he touches other Kodesh, and he touches Kodesh, so it becomes a Sheni. If that Kodesh touches other Kodesh, it becomes a Shlishi, and if that Kodesh touches other Kodesh, it becomes a Revi'i. Reb Meir says, Reb Meir Mitame Echad Ufosel Echad, says Reb Meir that it's be'etzim like a Sheni, that is Mitame one level to be a Shlishi, and then it's Posel by a Revi'i. But the Chachamim argue and they say, Keshem she'pasul ochle trume umashke trume, just like a Tvul Yom makes trume pasul as a Shlishi, kach posel ochle kodesh umashke kodesh, it also makes kodesh pasul at the Shlishi level, it cannot become a Revi'i. So therefore Rabbi Yochanan says that if a Tvul Yom touches Kodesh, it becomes pasul as a Shlishi, not a Revi'i, and therefore Rabbi Yochanan argues that, hey Rabbi Yossi, I would argue that food that's a Shlishi would be unable to make a Revi'i by Kodesh. Maskif la Rav Pape. Maskif la Rav Pape. Did I skip? No, I didn't. Maskif la Rav Pape. But Rav Pape asks a kasha and Rabbi Yechanan. Mimai de Rabbi Yesi ki Rabbanon svirale. Ha ha ha. Why? How do you know that Rabbi Yossi holds like the Rabbanon that there's no such thing as a Revi'i by Kodesh when it comes to the Tvul Yom? Dilma Kaba Shaul svirale. Maybe Rabbi Yossi holds like Abba Shaul, the Omar Litame Shnaim V'Lifsol Echod. That Abba Shaul says that there is Be'etzim a Revi'i when it comes to Kodesh. And maybe Rabbi Yossi holds like Abba Shaul, that if a Tvul Yom, right, that a Tvul Yom can be Metame Shtaim Ufosel Echod, i.e. a Tvul Yom can make a Revi'i. And therefore, since Rabbi Yossi holds like Abba Shaul, that a Tvul Yom can make a Revi'i, so then it also makes sense to say that a Shlishi can make a Revi'i, right? Ochel Shlishi can make a Revi'i as well. Isakadaitech Abba Shaul svirle, but then the Gemara says, meh, the Gemara says to Papa, meh, because if it enters your mind that Rabbi Yossi holds like Abba Shaul, Laise l'Revi'i ba'Kodesh me'ochel sheba machmas Tvul Yom. Well, if that's the case, then Rabbi Yossi should not have learned out from Mechusar Kippurim that Revi'i, that there's a Revi'i by Kodesh. He should have learned it out from food that a Tvul Yom touches. That if a Tvul Yom touches food, the Tvul Yom gufe mutter bechulin, a Tvul Yom is allowed to eat chulin, but the food that he touches, Omart Osir Revi'i Bakodesh, is able to make a Revi'i when it comes to Kodesh. So even though the Tvul Yom is mutter bechulin, but any food that he touches would be able to make a Revi'i when it comes to Kodesh, right? So meaning if a Tvul Yom, according to Abba Shaul, if a Tvul Yom touches Kodesh, it would become a Sheni. If it touches other Kodesh, it would become a Shlishi. If that Kodesh touches other Kodesh, it would become a Revi'i. So even though the Tvul Yom himself is able to eat Chulin, but any food that is touched by the Tvul Yom would be able to make a Revi'i. Shlishi Abba Machmas Sheni. A Shlishi that became Tameh from a Sheni, the Sheni Gufe Osir Bechulin, that when it comes to Chulin, a Sheni is Osir, right? It's possible when it comes to Chulin. A Sheni, Chulin is possible as a Sheni. Enudin She'osir Vi Bakodesh. So then certainly this Shlishi, which became Tameh from a Sheni, which is possible, certainly this Shlishi should be able to make a Revi'i when it comes to Kodesh. Okay, so again, so if you have the Ochel Abba Machmas Tvul Yom, that the Tvul Yom is mutter by Trume, that, by Chulin, right? That a Tvul Yom is mutter by Chulin, and yet the ochel that he touches is able to eventually create a revi'i. So this ochel shlishi that came from a sheni, that the sheni is possible when it comes to chulin, and therefore it's more stringent than a tvul yom. Certainly, this food that became tummy, the shlishi food that became tummy from a sheni, would be able to make a revi'i when it comes to kodesh. But maybe you'll say, no, you can't. You don't bring a proof from tvul yom, because you can ask mal tvul yom sheken avatoma. You can't bring a proof from a tvul yom because a tvul yom is an avatuma, right? Maybe he was a zav and he went to the mikveh. A zav is an avatuma. But Rabbi Yossi initially brought his proof from a mechusar kippurim, and who's the mechusar kippurim? Could also be a zav who's an avatuma, right? And therefore, there's no problem with. Don't bring me kashas from the fact that a tvul yom is an avatuma, right? Was an avatuma. So also a mechusar kippurim was an avatuma. So therefore that would be a good kasha. So Rabbi Yochanan had said, I don't understand Rabbi Yossi's opinion. Rabbi Yossi learns out from mechusar kippurim, but why not learn it out from tvul yom to say that it's taka not okay, like the rabbis? So Reb Papa said, well, maybe he holds like Reb Yossi, to which the Gemara says, yeah, but it's schwer to say. No, Reb Yossi holds like Abba Shol, but it's schwer to say that he holds like Abba Shol, because then he should have learned it out from Mechusar Kippur, from Tvul Yom rather than Mechusar Kippurim. So Reb Yochanan has a kasha. He says he doesn't understand Reb Yossi's opinion. All right, fine. Moving on. Friends, how you doing there? Don't worry, friends. This next sugya is hard. But after this next sugya, it's easy. And we're after this next sugya, we're gonna wrap up, hopefully, the fifth parak, if I'm not drained, but hopefully I shouldn't be drained. And then we're done with this Tumah entire business. But again, this next sugya you have to halt cup. Omer Rav Asi, Omer Ruv, V'amila Omer Rabban ben Isi Omer Rav, Reb Meir, V'Reb Yossi, V'Reb Yoshua, V'Reb Elazar, V'Reb Eliezer. Kulu svira lehu de'ein sheni osa shlishi b'chulin. All of these five Tanoim, Reb Meir, Reb Yossi, Reb Yoshua, Reb Elazar, and Reb Eliezer, they all hold de'ein sheni osa shlishi b'chulin. That a sheni does not make a shlishi when it comes to chulin, right? As we know, it doesn't go past sheni when it comes to chulin. Chulin can be chulin food can be a rishon, can be a sheni, cannot be a shlishi, cannot be a revi. Right, so they all hold that a sheni does not make a shlishi when it comes to chulin. Reb Meir did not. How do we know that this is Reb Meir's opinion? As we learn in the Mishnah, kol ata'un bias mayim midivrei sofrim, that anything that requires that needs to go to the mikvah midirabanan and is considered a sheni letuma, mitami es hakodesh, so it makes kodesh tamei, and that it'll be a shlishi, which could then be posel kodesh as a revi. Ufosel es truma, if it touches truma, it will be a shlishi, which is posel. When it comes to truma cannot be a revi. Umuter bechulin, and if it touches chulin, that chulin will be just fine. Uvemaiser as well as maiser. Div Reb Meir, that's Reb Meir's opinion. V'chacham osun b'maiser, whereas the chacham say that if this chulin that's a sheni touches maiser sheni, so then it will be possible. Fine, beseder. But we see that when it comes to chulin, at least everybody agrees that a sheni does not make a shlishi. And yeah, in we said Reb Meir specifically earlier, but it's Reb Meir and also the Rabbanan, but we don't know which rabbis those are, so we mentioned Reb Meir. But Kilu, the rabbis in this machlokas say that sheni does not make a shlishi by chulin. Rabbi Yossi, Hoda Amor. Rabbi Yossi, that which we said earlier, knew that Rabbi Yossi had said that there's a revi'i when it comes to kodesh, and he brought it from a kal v'chomer from a chusar kippurim. Who could remind me what that kal v'chomer is? That if a mechusar kippurim is mutter when it comes to trumeh, and yet it's possible, right? It's possible when it comes to kodesh. So then certainly shlishi, which is possible when it comes to trumeh, so then certainly it should make a revi'i when it comes to kodesh. But if you say that a shlishi that a sheni makes a shlishi when it comes to chulin, then that would have to mean that the shlishi then makes a revi'i when it comes to truma, which means that you'd be right. So then shlishi would not be possible when it comes to truma. A revi'i would be possible when it comes to truma, and a chamishi would be possible when it comes to kodesh, which would mean that you'd have to move everything down, right? You'd basically, the kal v'chomer would have to be that if mechusar kippurim is mutter by truma and yet he's possible when it comes to kodesh, so then you'd have to say that a shlishi which is possible by truma can make a revi'i which is possible by truma can make a chamishi by kodesh, right? So the im isay, right? If so, that a sheni can make a shlishi by chulin, so in laisi revi'i betrume v'chamishi b'kodesh. So then he would have to say that a revi'i, which is possible by truma, can make a chamishi by kodesh, but he doesn't say that, which means that memele holds that a sheni does not make a shlishi when it comes to chulin. Rabbi Yoshua, how do you know that Rabbi Yoshua holds that a sheni does not make a shlishi when it comes to chulin d'Tanan, as we learned in a Mishnah? Rabbi Eliezer Omer says Rabbi Eliezer Omer. No, Rabbi Eliezer Omer says the Heliker Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkanus ochel rishon. If a fellow eats food that's a rishon l'tumah, he himself becomes a rishon l'tumah. Sheni. If he eats food that's a sheni l'tumah, he himself becomes a sheni l'tumah. Shlishi. If he eats food that's a shlishi l'tumah, he himself becomes a shlishi l'tumah. Rabbi Yeshua Omer says Rabbi Yeshua ochel rishon ochel sheni. If a fellow eats either food that's a rishon or food that's a sheni. So he himself is a sheni. Shlishi. If he eats food that's a shlishi, sheni bakodesh, so he will be a sheni in order to be mitame kodesh, to be a shlishi. Ve'ein sheni betruma. And there's no so back up again. So if he eats food that's a shlishi, he becomes sheni with regards to being mitame kodesh. Ve'ein sheni betruma, but if he won't be mitame, or I think even posel truma, according to Rabbi Yeshua. I think that's how I understand it. That Rabbi Yeshua is saying that he would not make a shlishi when it comes to truma at all. Okay. Now, when we say that if you eat food that's a shlishi, it makes you a sheni. What are we talking about? Bechulin shenaisu al tyrus truma. That's talking about chulin. Shenaisu al tyrus truma. Who can tell me what chulin shenaisu al tyrus truma is? What that means is there were some people, particularly Kohanim, I think, but I think even just a lot of other people also, that they would treat everything stringently, basically, right? Meaning chulin, right? Theoretically, if chulin is a shlishi, there's no such thing as a shlishi by chulin, so you'd be able to eat it, right? But because if it was truma, it would be a problem, and in order to avoid a situation where you have truma becoming a shlishi and you end up eating it, and you can't, eating truma tmei is a problem. I think it's a chiyuv kares if you do it on purpose. So therefore, there were people who would just, even though chulin is less stringent, but they would treat chulin as if it was truma, al tyrus truma. They would treat everything as if it was truma, just to make sure that they avoid a situation where they accidentally eat truma tmei. So therefore, when we're talking about a shlishi over here, we're not talking about an actual shlishi, because we're talking about chulin, and there is no shlishi when it comes to chulin. But we're talking about chulin that you're treating al tyrus truma. You're treating it with the same level of stringency as if it was truma, and therefore you're treating the shlishi, even though it's chulin, you're treating it as tameh. And we're saying it's bechulin shenaisu al tyrus truma. We're talking about chulin that you're treating as if it was truma, and therefore, we're treating it as a, if it became a shlishi, even though if it was chulin, it wouldn't actually be tameh, but because you're treating al tyrus truma, you're assuming that it's, you're treating it as if it was tameh. So al tyrus truma in, yes, chulin that you're being stringent with and treating as if it was tameh. Now, Dennis, the next three words say al tyrus kodesh, but Rashi says a different gersa, which is chulin gride lo, but regular chulin that you're not treating al tyrus hakodesh, so that would be that would not be tameh. That would be tahor, right? So therefore, when it comes to chulin that you're not treating al tyrus truma, so then if you have sheni that touches chulin, it will not become a shlishi. Alma kosover and sheni osa shlishi b'chulin. So we see that Rabbi Yeshua holds that a sheni does not make a shlishi when it comes to chulin. Weiter. Rabbi Elazar, the Tanya Rabbi Elazar says Rabbi Elazar shloshten shavin, that with regard to the following three things, they're all the same. Harishin sheba kodesh, a rishon of kodesh, v'sheba chulin, v'sheba truma, a rishon of kodesh, chulin, truma. They're all the same in regard to the extent that mitame shnayim ufosel echad b'kodesh, that when it comes to kodesh, right, if this rishon, whether it's a rishon of kodesh, whether it's a rishon of chulin, whether it's a rishon of truma, if it comes in contact with kodesh, it will be mitame shnayim ufosel echad, that it will make a sheni and a shlishi, and finally a revi'i. Mitame echad ufosel echad b'truma, and if it comes in contact with truma, so it'll be mitame echad ufosel echad, i.e. it will make a sheni and then a shlishi, and that's it. Ufosel echad b'chulin. And when it comes to chulin, it's only posel one level, right? If you have a rishon that touches chulin, it'll become a sheni and that's it. So we see that according to Rabbi Elazar, a sheni, it ends there. A sheni does not make a shlishi when it comes to chulin. Rabbi Eliezer, and finally, how do we know that Rabbi Eliezer holds that a sheni does not make a shlishi when it comes to chulin? Ditnan, as we learn in a Mishnah. Rabbi Eliezer almost says, Rabbi Eliezer, friends, this is complicated. Chala niteles min atahora ala tmea. Ho ho. Who can tell me what chala is? Chala is that if you have a dough, and if you have dough, and you have to separate 1/24 of the dough, and that goes to the kohen. We treat it as truma. So you have 1/24 of the, so you separate 1/24 of the dough, fine. Now if the dough is tameh, so then it's 1/48 of the dough. Now if a person deliberately, now what Rabbi Eliezer is commenting on is a situation where a fellow deliberately made the dough tameh. And he's saying that chala niteles min haTorah latmea. If you deliberately make the dough tameh, you don't separate the challah from the tameh dough. You separate the challah from tahor dough. If you have tahor dough, you have to separate the challah of the tameh dough. You separate it from tahor dough, and you say, I'm separating this challah, on behalf of the tameh dough. So you have to separate it from tahor dough. Okay, fine. So now ketzat, so how do you do this? Right? You have tameh dough, and now you're separating challah, but not from it, from different dough. How does that work? So shtei isos achas torah v'achas tameh. So you have these two doughs, one is torah, one is tameh. Notel k'dei challah me'iso shelo hurma chalasa. So what you do is, you have the tameh dough, which you deliberately made tameh, and now we're saying don't separate challah to give to the kohen from there, rather separate challah from tahor dough. Now this must be tahor dough that has not yet had its challah separated, because if it already had challah separated, well then it's no longer chayiv in challah. It's potter, right? You already separated challah from it, and therefore it's potter from challah. And you can't separate. Right now you have this tameh dough which is chayiv in challah, and this tahor dough which is potter from challah, because you already separated. You can't separate from potter to be motzi the chayiv. So therefore, it must be that this tahor dough has not yet had challah separated from it. Okay, fine. V'nosein pochis mikibeya be'emtza. Kidei lito min amukov. Friends, do you hear this? So what you do is, you from the tahor dough, you separate the equivalent of what you need to separate for challah on behalf of the tameh dough. And then what you do is, you chop another shtickle from the tahor dough, and you press it, you connect it to the tameh dough. Because the point is that when, it's a funny thing that we're doing, right? You have this dough that's tameh, and you need to separate challah, but you're not separating challah from the tameh. You need to separate challah, but you're not separating the challah from the tameh dough, which needs to be separated from. You're separating it from the tahor dough. But we really want, essentially, to connect the two doughs together, or at least connect the challah that you're separating to the tameh dough, so that the challah that you're separating is part of the tameh dough. But you can't actually connect this challah to the tameh dough, because then it would become tameh. So what you do is, you chop another shtickle from the tahor dough, and that you press to the tameh dough, and then you take what you separated as challah, and you connect that to the connector, to this connecting piece of dough, and then it's all considered like one big dough, and yet what you're separating as challah remains tahor because it's not directly touching the tameh dough, it's touching this intermediary which is touching the tameh dough. Now, there's more to the story. You might be thinking, but if the tameh dough is touching the intermediary, which is touching the what you separate as challah, wouldn't that become tameh as well? First of all, it's part of the whole machlokas. But one important thing is that it said pachos mikebeya. Did I read that? Right? V'nosein pachos mikebeya be'emtza k'dei lito min hamukaf. That's important that it's less than a beya. That less than a kibetza does not transmit tumah. So if you have tumah sa'ochlin, if you have something that is less than a beitza, so it can become tameh, but it can't transfer tumah sa'ochlin. And therefore, because this intermediary is less than a beitza, so when you press it to the tameh dough, so yeah, it becomes tameh, but when you take what you separated as challah and press that to this intermediary, that what you separated as challah does not become tameh because it's not touching the tameh dough, it's touching this intermediary, and while the intermediary is tameh, but because it's less than a beitza, it won't transfer tumah to what you separated as challah, which is touching it. And that way, what you separated as challah is still connected to the tameh dough, but also remains tahor. But chacham osum. The chacham say that nisht. Chacham say you can't do this. V'tanya kibeitza. And we learn in the Brisa that interestingly, the same achlokas would apply even to a beitza. That Rabbi Eliezer would say that actually the intermediary piece can even be the size of a beitza. Big chiddush. The intermediary piece can even be an egg's worth, which means that it's capable of transferring tumah, and yet you can use it as an intermediary. You can have the dough, which is tameh, and then connect this other piece of dough, which is the size of a egg, which is capable of transferring tumah, and connect that to the tameh dough, and then take what you separated as challah and connect that to the intermediary, and Rabbi Eliezer says that would still be acceptable. So savrua idi ve'idi be'isa rishona, and we're assuming that in both the Mishnah, which is the first everything up to Vitanya Kibetza, so everything up until then, everything we've been talking about is now a Mishnah. It was a Mishnah, and then we said Vitanya Kibetza, that can even be a Kibetza. So in both the Mishnah and the Brisa, we're talking about where the dough is a rishon the tumah. And v'chulin atvulin lechala lo kechala damu, and dough which has not yet had chala separated from it is lo kechala damu. It is not considered like chala with regard to tumah. It's not considered like truma. Like chala is a type of truma. It's not considered like truma with regard to tumah. So therefore, it's considered like chulin. It's considered like chulin, and when you separate it, right? So again, we have the tameh dough, and we're saying that tameh dough is a rishon, and then you have this other dough, the tahor dough that you're separating challah from. That tahor dough is just considered like chulin, and when you separate the challah from it, that's going to be for the tameh dough. What you separated is still remains chulin until you say this is challah, but you haven't yet said this is challah. So it's still chulin, what you separated and you're intending to use as challah, but it's still chulin. So now, my lab welcome iflagi. So again, both Rabbi Eliezer and the Chacham agree that the first dough, that the tameh dough is a rishon l'tumah, and they also both agree that what you separated for challah is chulin right now. Until you say this is challah, it's going to be chulin. So now, malav alkam iflige. So let's say that the machloikes between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chacham is the marsover ein sheni ose shlishi bechulin. That Rabbi Eliezer holds that a sheni cannot make a shlishi by chulin. Remember, what we separated as challah has not yet been called challah yet, so it's still chulin. The dough that's tameh, we're saying, is a rishon l'tumah. it's then touching the intermediary, which becomes a sheni l'tuma, and Rabbi Eliezer says it can even be a kibetza, which means that it's capable of transferring tuma. But because what you separated as chala is still chulin, and ein sheni osa shlishi b'chulin, so this dough which is tameh as a rishon, which is now touching the intermediary, which becomes a sheni, but it stops there because that sheni is unable to transfer tuma to what you separated as chala, which is chulin, and there's no shlishi when it comes to chulin. Umar savar, whereas the chacham holds sheni also shlishi b'chulin, whereas the chacham say that a sheni can make a shlishi by chulin, and therefore you can't do it. Because the dough that's a rishon, which is touching the intermediary to make it a sheni, will then make what you separated for chala a shlishi, and that's obviously not okay. So Omer Rav Mari Breder of Kahana, so Rav Mari Breder of Kahana says not necessarily actually the chuli alma ein sheni osa shlishi b'chulin. Actually everybody, even the chachamim hold that a sheni does not make a shlishi when it comes to chulin. So if that's the case, then what are they concerned about? So v'hocha b'chulin hatvulin lechala kamiflege. Well, here the question is, how do you relate to this dough that's tahor, that's chulin, but hasn't yet had challah separated from it? Do you treat it with the same stringency as challah itself? So my sover kichala damu. So the chacham say that we have to treat what was separated for challah as challah, and therefore we have to treat it. It's truma, and therefore it's not a question of is a sheni making a shlishi by chulin. It's a question of is a sheni making a shlishi by truma, and the answer is yes. So therefore, so the chachamim are saying that kichala damu, that we have to treat this dough that was separated for challah as challah, and therefore with the tuma stringencies of challah, which is truma. And therefore, the dough that's a rishon, which is touching the intermediary to make it a sheni, if that sheni now touches this challah, it's going to make it a shlishi. And even if the sheni is less than a kibetza, the chacham would say it's a problem because we're concerned that what if you make a mistake and it is a kibetza. So that's why the chacham say that it's a problem, because we're concerned about the sheni making a shlishi by challah. Umay savar, whereas Rabbi Eliezer holds lo kechala damu, that we're not going to treat this piece that we separated as challah, and it's chulin, and therefore we're not concerned. That's why it's okay. Alternatively, or you can say that no, both, right? Even the rabbis hold that we would not treat this challah as challah, it would be chulin. Well, then what's the concern? Well, we're not concerned about the challah. Also, a sheni does not make a shlishi, but it's not about the challah, it's about the intermediary. Because by touching the intermediary to the tameh dough, you're making the intermediary tameh. And the question is, can you do that? Can you make this? Are you allowed to make this intermediary tameh? My sovereign mutter ligram tuma lechulin sheberetz Yisrael. Rabbi Eliezer holds it's permitted. You can touch this intermediary to the tameh dough, and it's okay to make the intermediary tameh. Whereas the chacham said, no, you can't do that. You can't take tahor dough and just touch it to a tameh dough and make it tameh in Eretz Yisrael. You can't do that, and therefore the chacham say it's aser. But we see that definitely Rabbi Eliezer and possibly even the chacham hold that a sheni does not make. It sounds like we're saying the chacham as well hold that a sheni does not make a shlishi by chulin. All right, there we go, friends. And with that, we wrap up the Tuma entire stuff. The rest, I think I want to go weiter and just try to finish this parak, because we've been like a shtickle. I've been like not doing. I don't want to fall behind, and let's just finish the parak. And then tomorrow we'll just start at the beginning of the next parak. I think that's what we're going to do. I think we're going to do a whole parak in tomorrow's daf. That's the plan, anyways. And anyways, the rest of the parak is takazeh shein. I think that means it's very nice. All right. So now, okay. Says the Gemara. Bobayim dor shabakive v'chulei. So, right, we said in the Mishnah that a machlokas between, I think it was Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Yossi Aglili, I think, about how do you relate to the area outside the city of the Levites. Rabbi Akiva said that we learned that the 2,000 Am is referring to Tchum Shabbos, and I think it was Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Should I look it up? Let's see. Rabbi Yossi Aglili, says that 1,000 Amis was a recreational space, and 1,000 Amis was for fields and orchards. So now, what's the machlokas? Marsaver tchumin deraisa, marsaver derabonon. Oh, that's big. That Rabbi Akiva holds that Tchum Shabbos is midoraisa, and he learns it from this area outside the Levite cities. That when it says 2,000 Amos, it's referring to Tchum Shabbos. So that's how we see that Tchum Shabbos is taka midoraisa. Whereas Rabbi Yossi Aglili says nisht, Tchum Shabbos is not doraisa, and therefore it's obviously not talking about Tchum Shabbos. It's talking about 1,000 Amos of open space and 1,000 Amos of Sotah Suchromim. Fine. Tana Rabbanan do Abistapo Bayim Darsh Rabbi Akiva. Ho. That on that day, Rabbi Akiva taught B'shah Sha'alu Yisrael Min Hayom, that when the Yidden came out of the sea of reeds, Nasnu Eneim Lo Mashira, so they said Shira, they praised the Eibishter, they sang a song. How do they say Shira? Like an adult who is leading the Hallel. And the people would answer after Moses the beginning of Oz Yashir. Moshe Omer Ashir LaHashem. Moses said Ashir LaHashem. Ve'en Omer Ashir LaHashem. And they responded Ashir LaHashem. Moshe Omer Kigoyo Goyo. Moses says Kigo Ga'a. Ve'en Omer Ashir LaHashem. And they say Ashir LaHashem. Rabbi Eliezer ben Rabbi Yossi Aglili Omer. It's like a little guy who's leading the Hallel. And they respond after him whatever he's saying. Moshe Omar Ashir LaHashem, Vein Omrim Ashir LaHashem. Moses said Ashir LaHashem, and they said Ashir LaHashem. Moshe Omar Kigo Go. Moses said Kigo Go. Vein Omrim Kigo Go, and they respond Kigo Go. They respond whatever he says. Rabbi Nechemia says Rabbi Nechemia Kisofa Apiris al Shma, like a Malamed Tinoikis, like a teacher who is being Poris al Shma Bebeis HaKnesses. What does that mean? Shu Poseach Tchile Ve'enon Acharv. That the way that works is he starts everybody off, and then everybody, like he'll start with the brachas, and he'll say it out loud, and then everybody else says the brachas, and then they all read the rest together. So Moses started them off, and Rashi says something pretty givaldic. I told Reb David Weinberg that I would give him a shout out, that we were studying this Gemara at the Chasana. By the way, Reb David, if you're listening to this, you should know I spared you. You should know, Reb David, because I hadn't yet learned Daf Lamed Amud Aleph yet, all the Tumah and Tara and stuff. I gave you the fun stuff. I sat next to you, I said, come, let's learn some famous Agaditas together. I didn't say, come, let's try to figure out if a sheni makes a shlishi by chulin. So, but then again, we help each other. I helped you out by giving you the good stuff. You helped me out by being my chavrusa, instead of having a good time with the other people. All right. So Shkoyach Reb David Weinberg, and of course his brother Reb Josh helped us out yesterday. Oh my gosh, it's driving me nuts with ChatGPT. Okay, fine. Now, where am I? God, I'm telling you, what's going on with my nose? Can somebody come over here and just rub my nose for me while I record? Then I wouldn't have to do it. All right, where am I? So they don't know. Okay, from B'maika Miflagei. So what are they? What are they arguing about? Right, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Yossi Aglili, Rabbi Nechemia. So Rabbi Akiva holds Leimor Amilso Kamaisa. That when it says Leimor, right, that the people will essentially repeat. It's talking about the first Ashir LaHashem. So they would always go back to the first thing. Rabbi Yossi Aglili suffered Leimor Akol Milso Milso. Rabbi Yossi Aglili understands Leimor as being at every phrase that Moses said they would say. Reb Nechemia holds Vayomru the Amru Kulu Pade Adade, that when it says Vayomru means that they all said it together. Lamor the Pasach Moshe Bereishah, when it says Lamor, it means that Moses started them off. So Moses started them off, and then everybody else read it together from the rest of it. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Darish Rabbi Yossi Aglili Darshan B'Shasha Alu Yisrael Min Ayom, when the Yidden came out of the Sea of Reeds, Nasnu Neim Lo Mashira, they wanted to sing a niggin. V'cheitzad Amru, how did they say Shira? Olel Mutol Al Birkei Imo, a young little fellow was sitting on his mother's knees. V'tinok Yonek Mishdei Imo, and an even younger little fellow was nursing. When they saw the divine presence, the young fellow lifted up his neck, and the younger fellow stopped nursing, and they said, this is my God, and I will glorify him. As the Pasuk says, from the mouths of the young fellows and the younger fellows, Yisad Ta'oz, you established strength. Reb Meir would say, Minayin she'afilu ubrim sheb me'imon amru shira. Rabbi David Weinberg, I get, this is the Gemara I learned with you, not Sheni and Shlishi. That even fetuses in their mother's bellies said Shira, sang the song. Even fetuses, that were unborn fetuses, sang the song at the Sea of Reeds. Shneimar, as the Apostle says, "Makelus Baruch Elokim Hashem Mikor Yisrael." That even that they bless the Eibishter even from the source, even from the womb. But Bayim Darish, Rabbi Yoshua ben Urkanus, so Avad Eov v'chulei. So Rabbi Yoshua ben Urkanus darshan that day that Eov served God out of love, and he brought it from the parsha, from the pasuk. What did it say? It says the pasuk says, "Hey niktiluni lo ayachel," right? That even if he hey niktileni lo ayachel, that even if he kills me, I will still pine for him. So now the kasha is, was it lo ayachel to him, or lo with an aleph, I will not? So that was the shaila. So then velechze hi lo ibelamad aleph ksiv lohu ibelamad vav ksiv lohu. Just look at how it's spelled, friends. If it's spelled with an aleph, it means no. If it's spelled with an vav, it means him. It means yes, basically, to him. But one second, just because it's written lamed aleph, that doesn't necessarily mean that we understand it to mean no. When the pasuk says that whenever the Yidden are in a tight spot, it's painful, or whenever the Yidden are in pain, it's painful for God. But it says lo, it says with an aleph. So do you understand it as what? When the Yidden are in pain, the Eibishter is not in pain? If we say, yeah, when the Yidden are in pain, the Eibishter is not in pain. But it says in that pasuk that and that the Eibishter saves them. Meaning, because he's in pain, he saves them from it. So when it says lo tsar, and it says with lamed aleph, no, it means lo, lamed vav, it means to him, that when the Yidden are pained, the Eibishter is pained, and therefore he saves us. So therefore, if you have if it's written lamed aleph, it could mean no, it could mean him. So it can go both ways. Depends on the context. Tanya, we learn in Breshit of Meir, Nemer Yirei Elokim be'Eov. It says a God-fearing individual by Eov, and Nemer Yirei Elokim ba'Avram, and it says a God-fearing individual by Abraham. Ma Yirei Elokim ba'Omer ba'Avram me'ahava. Just like when it says Yirei Elokim by Avram Avinu, it means out of love. Af Yirei Elokim ba'Omer be'Eov me'ahava. Also, when it says Yirei Elokim by Eov, it means out of love. Avram Gufei Minolan. How do you know that Abraham served God out of love? The seed of Abraham who loved me. My ika ben osim yahav lo osim yirva. miyira. What's the difference between somebody who serves the Eibishter out of love rather than somebody who serves the Eibishter out of fear? And Rashi points out that this is different than what we said the other day, where that love, serving God, out of love and out of fear is not ideal. Over there, it was talking about where you're serving God only because you love getting schar, you love getting reward, or because you're scared to get punished. But here it's talking about, love. Right? What does Rashi say? That you just love the Eibishter. You're also that God is so awesome that that his awe is on the people. So what's the difference between somebody who serves God out of love versus somebody who serves God out of fear? Ika, or out of awe. So Ika Hadatani Reb Shimon ben Elazar Omer. The following brayso, Reb Shimon ben Elazar says, it's greater to serve God out of love than out of fear. Because one has ramifications for 1,000 years and the other for 2,000 years. It says by love, la'alofim, right? It says also chesed, he does kindness la'alofim for thousands of generations. Le'ohavai, for those who love me, and for those who fear me, betzim. But for those who love me, it says 1,000. It says by fear, that those who fear my mitzvahs for 1,000 generations. So we saw that by love it was 2,000, and by fear it was 1,000. But also by 1,000 years it says to those who love him as well as those who fear him, essentially. So maybe love is also for 1,000 years. Yeah, but you have to compare it to that which is closer, right? If you look at the first puzzle, it says le'ohavai, la'alofim le'ohavai. So we see that love is juxtaposed to 1,000, whereas in the last puzzle it says l'shomer mitzvosav le'elef door. So and in that last pasuk where it mentions love, but it also the fear is the one that's connected to the 1,000. Okay, so if you serve God out of love, so there will be kindness for 2,000 generations, but out of fear it's 1,000 generations. Fine. Hanu trei talmidei davu yazve kame de Rove. There were two students sitting in front of Rove. Chad omar lei ikaryun bechalmoi. One student says that I saw in a dream the following verse, Marav tuvcha asher tzofanta l'reyecha, that there's givaldige stuff that you've saved for those who fear you. So he's saying that he's dreaming about fearing God. The other one says that it appeared to me in my dream, and this pasuk says, talks about those who love your name. Those who love your name. So it's a pasuk about loving God. Omer lehu, so Rava says, Tavaychu Rabbanon tzadikei gmurei atun mar me'ahava mar me'ir. Rava says, you're both big tzadikim. One is a tzadik me'ahava, one's a tzadik me'ira, but both big tzadikim nonetheless. Hajun oloch kshim shamayim. We'll come back to kshim shamayim. That was a difficult parak, man. Again, let me just remind you, if anybody says Daf Beis of Masechta Sotah is difficult, you say Daf Chof Tes and Daf Lamed are much more difficult. Friends, that was Daf Lamed of Masechta Sotah, and that was also the 5th parak of Masechta Sotah. Hope you enjoyed. Peace out.